Hey, welcome back to the Modern Math Teacher podcast. I'm your host, Kristen Moore, and today we're talking all about how to rock a successful parent teacher conference and open house. So, if you're like most teachers, fall conferences can be a little bit stressful, but it's a time to connect with families and show them how their students are doing. And we want to make sure those meetings are productive and positive. Now, in today's episode, I'm going to share some practical tips for preparing for these important events, including a free pre conference check in form that you can use to streamline the process and set the stage for great conversations. Stick around and I'll tell you how to grab the form in this week's email so you're all set before conference day. If you aren't already on the list, head to morethanjustx.com/subscribe to get weekly emails with today's best teaching tips and strategies you can use in your math classroom. And hurry because this week you're getting that pre conference check in form. And with that, let's dive into today's episode. First up, I want to focus in on conferences. Now, our goal isn't just to report grades, right? It's to engage our families in ways that build partnerships, support students, and showcases the value of the teaching methods you use, like project-based learning, real-world problem-solving activities, building thinking classrooms, or the modern classroom model. But here's the thing, you guys. Preparation is everything. A well structured conference can turn what could feel like a stressful checklist into a really powerful opportunity to show your parents how their child is doing and growing. So let's break that down with 3 tips for you. Tip number 1 is to use a pre conference reflection form. Now, one of the most powerful tools I've found to make conferences more focused and productive is using a pre conference reflective form. And again, you can grab a copy of this as a freebie in this week's email. But here's basically how it works. You are going to have your students reflect on their progress. Now, a few days before the conference, give your students the chance to reflect on their own learning. This reflection form asks them to share one win that they're proud of, one challenge they're facing, and one goal for the next marking period. This self reflection not only allows your students to be thinking about their own progress, it allows them to take ownership of the conversation you and their parents are going to have. And that's especially powerful in student led conferences. But even in a traditional format, it shifts the tone towards a collaborative dialogue, supporting that student through those wins, their challenges, and developing a plan for that goal. Now, I want you to be using that form during the conference. When you sit down with parents, use the reflection form to guide the conversation. Instead of jumping right into what the grades are or any problem areas, start by celebrating the student's successes, what it is that they are proud of. Then talk about the challenge that the student has identified and brainstorm together how you, the student, and the family can support them moving forward. This form also typically includes a section for you to fill out a glow and a grow. Okay. A glow, again, is something that a student is doing well that you, the teacher, want to highlight and call out. And it can be different from what the student self identified. A grow is an area where the student can improve. This opportunity creates a balanced, positive conversation where students and their parents really see both the strengths and the growth areas for the student. And it essentially sets the tone for a really supportive, solution focused dialogue. Now, pro tip for you, keep these reflection forms organized by class period. And when you're meeting with a parent, like I have 130 something Algebra 2 students, I'll ask them, what hour is your student in? And then I can go and grab from there. When conference times get hectic, quickly grab the right conference form by having them easily organized. It's going to save you time and stress during that back to school parent meetings. And you'll walk into each conference prepared and calm with all your talking points ready to go. Now, tip number 2. I want you to make sure that you are communicating the value of the teaching methods you use in your classroom. Now that we have a structure for the conference, we want to talk about communicating the value of your teaching methods to the parents. So, for many of us who are listeners here, we use things like BTC and PBL and real world tasks, and our parents might not immediately understand how these methods benefit their child, especially because they are different from the way the parents were taught. They're probably expecting to hear about traditional math skills or worksheet practice. And here's how I want you to frame the conversation about the teaching methods you use and how it's going to benefit the students. Number 1, start by explaining the why behind your methods. Explain how project based learning and real world applications help students develop essential skills, not just in math, but for life. Skills like problem solving, critical thinking, collaboration, perseverance. Give concrete examples of projects or tasks that their child has worked on and how it connects to the real world. That's going to show the benefits to the parents. And then I want you to focus in on showcasing specific successes. Now, if possible, I want you to be able to use a student's work to illustrate those successes. Maybe, their child worked on a project where they had to solve a real world problem, like budgeting for a class event or designing a model using geometry. Highlight how these tasks engage their students in deeper learning compared to just traditional worksheets and traditional like sit and get approaches. And I want to make sure that you are also going to be emphasizing growth. Let your parents know that class is not just focused on what the student knows right now, but also how they're growing and how that works in your classroom, whether that's with mastery based grading or things like PBL, which are great ways for students to teach themselves about perseverance and grit. You can also point out how their child is learning to work through those difficult problems, make mistakes, go back, identify their struggles, learn from them, and then try again. Okay. And whew, that's a lot. Tip number 3, presenting your best at open house. Now, the first 2 tips were all about conferences because it is conference season, but some of us still have like an open house in the middle of fall if we didn't have one at the beginning. So, when you have open house, a lot of times that is the first opportunity parents are going to get a first impression of your classroom, and you want to make sure that it's a positive one. So, here are just a couple quick tips for a successful open house if you've still got one of those coming up. Number 1, set up a little mini project showcase. So, have examples of student work, including projects, thinking tasks, PBL units displayed all around the room. This not only demonstrates what your students are learning, but it gives you an easy way to show parents how these methods engage their students. 2, provide some takeaways. You want to make sure you give parents a brief handout that outlines your teaching philosophy, how you use, real world problem solving, thinking tasks, modern classroom models, whatever it is that you use, and how they can support their child at home. That's key. We really want to make sure that they identify themselves as a collaborator in the education process. So you can also include a list of, upcoming projects, due dates, important classroom milestones, anything like that so the parent feels informed and involved. And 3, make sure you are using visuals. Everyone likes to see things, right? So a visual bulletin board or some sort of slideshow featuring student work or classroom expectations, photos of your students engaged in hands-on learning, that can really go a long way towards illustrating your classroom's culture and values and helping parents really see what it's like to experience math in your class. All right, you guys. Well, this has been fast and furious, but there you have it. A quick guide to fall conferences and open house success so that you can rock this back to school conference season. Now, by using those pre conference reflection forms we talked about, you're going to have that focused, meaningful conversation with the parents. And by communicating the value of your teaching methods, you help them see how your classroom is preparing their child for success. Now, don't forget to grab that free reflection form in this week's email to make sure your conferences are more organized and impactful. It's a really, really simple tool, but it will save you time and make a huge difference in how parents engage with you and your classroom. I'll make sure to link to it in the show notes below. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to tune in to this week's episode of the Modern Math Teacher Podcast. If you found this episode helpful, I'd love for you to share it with a colleague. Just, quick button on your phone, hit share. And as always, feel free to leave a rating and review. That helps us be visible to more teachers who could benefit just like you. Now, let me know if you found the fall conferences and open house helpful and what's going on in your classroom. I'd love to hear your stories and tips. Make sure to connect with me on socials at More Than Just X. Now, until next time, you guys, keep transforming your math class and making those real world connections. Keep involving those families. And as always, you guys, keep it real. I'll see you then.